The distress beacon screamed across 3 solar systems before anyone stupid enough answered it. Vrenka watched the decoded message flicker across her tactical display for the 7th time, mandibles clicking in what her human colleagues had learned to recognize as sardonic amusement. The Kishari navigator's 6 eyes refracted the blue light into kaleidoscopic patterns across her chitinous face. They rated it Category 9, she announced to the bridge crew. The survey team lasted 47 minutes planet-side. Commander Thilos, a Muridan whose species had colonized 17 systems through careful risk assessment and aggressive avoidance of danger, felt his throat sacs inflate with anxiety. Category 9. That's extinction-level classification. For most species, yes. Virenka's antennae twitched. The planet's designated DX4477. Preliminary scans show breathable atmosphere, liquid water, abundant resources. The survey team called it paradise in their first transmission, and in their last transmission, they screamed a lot. Very descriptive screaming, actually. Something about the trees having teeth. Vrenka pulled up the ecological data. Gravity is 1.8 standard. Atmospheric pressure fluctuates wildly. Temperature ranges from -40 to +55 degrees within the same rotation. The flora produces airborne neurotoxins. The fauna, she paused. Well, the fauna considers everything else fauna. The loss's fur rippled with distress. Why are we even discussing a rescue operation? Because, a voice drawled from the doorway, 17 sentients are still alive down there and council law says we try. Captain Yannick Okafor stood 2 meters tall, which was average for a human but towering by most species standards. His dark skin bore the scars of a dozen deployments, and his eyes held that particular quality that made other species nervous, the calm certainty of a persistence predator that had calculated the odds and decided they were acceptable. Melas's ears flattened. Captain, with respect, Category 9 means, I read the file, Commander. Yannick moved to the central display with the fluid economy of motion that made humans such effective soldiers. I also read that your insurance won't cover retrieval operations above Category 7, and you need council approval for anything above 5. Precisely. So we filed a report, marked the planet as prohibited, and let 17 people die because of bureaucracy. Yannick's smile didn't reach his eyes. That's not how humans do things. Vrenka clicked her approval. She'd served with humans for 3 cycles now, ever since the Kishari Concordance had allied with Earth's coalition. The Admiralty sent you specifically, Captain. They must have anticipated your response. Oh, they definitely did. Yannick pulled up the planetary specs, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface with the casual dexterity that came from a species that had evolved opposable thumbs and the patience to use them. DX4477. No registered name. 3rd planet in a yellow dwarf system. How original. He zoomed in on the topology. Mountainous regions, dense jungle, 3 major oceans. Looks like someone cranked Earth's difficulty settings to maximum and then added bonus levels. That's one way to describe a death world. The Las muttered. Death world. Yannick tested the phrase. You know what we call planets like this back home? Australia. Well, if Australia had been a whole planet and significantly more motivated to kill everything, he turned to his second officer. Lieutenant Kovac, prep the Valkyrie for atmospheric entry. Full hazard loadout. Mari Kovac, who had survived the siege of Proxima Station by virtue of being too stubborn to die and too skilled to fail, nodded crisply. Want me to bring the fun toys? All of them. If this planet wants to play hard mode, we'll show it what hard mode actually looks like. Vrenka's mandibles clicked rapidly. The Kishari equivalent of nervous laughter. Captain, I feel obligated to remind you that the last rescue team was composed of Vrelian commandos. They're considered among the most formidable warriors in the coalition. Were they human? Obviously not. Then they weren't formidable enough. Yannick studied the terrain maps. How many humans do we have on board? Including yourself. 12. Perfect. We'll take 8. Kovac, Ramos, Okoye, Tanaka, both Andersons. No relation, by the way, plus Zhao and myself. He glanced at Thalos. We'll leave you 4 to keep the ship running if things go sideways. If things go sideways, the Loss's voice climbed an octave. Captain, Things went sideways the moment that planet formed. Then we'll just have to go diagonal. Yannick clapped the Muradin commander on the shoulder with enough force to make him stagger. Don't worry. We do this kind of thing on weekends back home. Build character. Besides, if humans can colonize Mars, Nevada, and Michigan, we can handle one cranky jungle planet. 2 hours later, the Valkyrie screamed through DX-4477's atmosphere like a meteor with a grudge. The dropship's hull heated to temperatures that would have liquefied most species' bones, but the 8 humans inside sat strapped in their harnesses with expressions ranging from focused concentration to what could only be described as eager anticipation. 40,000 meters, Kovac called out from the pilot's seat, her hands steady on controls that shook hard enough to blur vision, encountering significant turbulence. These wind shears are insane, just like flying through a hurricane, drawled Ramos from his gunner position. The Cuban-American sergeant had logged more atmospheric combat drops than some species had logged meals. Except hurricanes usually have the decency to not exist at 40,000 meters. The Valkyrie bucked violently. Warning lights painted the cabin in strobing reds and oranges. 20,000 meters, Kovac continued, utterly unfazed. Entering the cloud layer. Yeah, that's interesting. Lightning strikes, thunder cracked across the hull hard enough to rattle teeth. The tactical display showed 3 simultaneous lightning strikes hitting their shields. Frequent, Kovac finished. Very frequent, and significantly more powerful than standard electrical storms. Alko Gay, who had grown up in Lagos and learned to navigate chaos before she could walk, checked her weapon. Does the planet know we're trying to help the survey team? Because it seems personally offended by our presence. The planet's automated defenses are quite sophisticated, offered Tanaka, the team's xenobiologist. Her Japanese calm was legendary. She'd once dissected a living Grell parasite while it was trying to dissolve her hand. The atmospheric conditions suggest an ecosystem that actively resists outside contamination. So it's xenophobic, Yannick said. Fantastic. We're rescuing people from a racist planet. That's not exactly, Tanaka started. 10,000 meters. Kovac interrupted, breaking through the canopy in 3, 2, 1. The jungle exploded into view. Holy Mother of Ramos breathed. The trees weren't just large. They were architecturally impossible, spiraling up through the clouds in twisted configurations that hurt to look at directly. Their bark wasn't brown but a shifting kaleidoscope of purples and deep crimsons. And as the Valkyrie descended, it became clear that the branches were moving independently of the wind. Sensors are picking up aggressive plant growth, Tanaka reported, her scientific detachment cracking slightly. Emphasis on aggressive. Those vines are actively reaching for us. Evasive patterns, Yannick ordered. Find the survey team's last known position. The Valkyrie banked hard, its engines screaming. A vine thick as a shuttle bus lashed past where they'd been seconds before. Then another. Then a dozen more, coordinating their attacks with disturbing intelligence. The plants are hunting us, Zhao observed. The engineer's matter-of-fact tone suggested this was unusual but not particularly concerning. This is new, locked onto the beacon, Kovac reported. 2 clicks northeast. Setting down in... Oh no is not regulation landing terminology, Lieutenant, Yannick said mildly. The ground is moving, sir. They descended through a gap in the canopy and immediately understood the problem. The jungle floor wasn't solid earth but a seething carpet of things. Millions of them, each roughly the size of a human hand, skittering and crawling over each other in a biomass that extended in every direction. Those are Drell beetles, Tanaka identified, her voice tight, native to Category 7 worlds. They're scavengers that typically strip a carcass to bones in under a minute. I've never seen a colony this size. This shouldn't be possible. Yeah, well, neither should flying, but here we are, Ramos quipped, though his hand had moved to his weapon. Find us some solid ground, Kovac, Yannick ordered. Working on it, sir. There's an outcropping 90 meters west that looks less alive. That's the spirit. Land us on the less alive ground. The Valkyrie touched down on a rocky plateau that jutted above the beetle carpet like an island in a chitinous sea. The moment the landing struts made contact, something roared in the distance. It was a sound that bypassed the ears and resonated directly in the chest cavity, a noise that said clearly and definitively, "You are food. Everyone out." Yannick commanded. Standard formation. Tanaka, I want a full environmental analysis. Zhao, keep the Valkyrie hot. We may need to leave quickly. Everyone else, weapons free but hold fire. Unless absolutely necessary. We're guests here. Very unwelcome guests, muttered Samuel Anderson, the younger of the two Andersons, as he hefted his plasma rifle. He was barely 23, fresh enough from Earth that he still flinched at sounds no one else could hear. That's the only kind of guests worth being, replied his squadmate, Jennifer Anderson. No relation, who at 45 had survived enough combat drops to have opinions about which kinds of death were most aesthetically pleasing. They disembarked into Hell's humid afternoon. The air was thick enough to chew, laden with moisture and a cocktail of chemical compounds that made Tanaka's sensors light up like a festival. The heat was oppressive, at least 50 degrees, and the humidity was somewhere north of swimming pool. For the humans it was uncomfortable. For most species it would have been fatal within minutes. Oxygen content is 32%, Tanaka reported, her scanner chirping. That's dangerously high. Most species would experience toxicity. There are also trace amounts of 17 different neurotoxins, 4 paralytic agents, and something I'm identifying as aggressive histamine triggers. So basically, the air is trying to kill us, Okoye summarized. The air is definitely trying to kill most people, Tanaka agreed. Humans will experience some irritation and possibly enhanced aggression due to the oxygen content. Enhanced aggression? Yannick smiled grimly. So a Tuesday, the roar came again, closer this time. The beetles scattered at its approach, parting like a disturbed ocean. Thermal signatures, Korvach called out from the Valkyrie's sensor suite. Large, very large. Multiple contacts converging on the survey team's position. Whatever they are, they've got the survivors surrounded. Then we'd better move. Yannick checked his rifle. Double time, people. Stay together, watch your six. And remember, the jungle attacked. It wasn't dramatic. There was no warning. 1 second they were moving through relatively open terrain. The next the ground itself erupted with creatures that had apparently concluded that waiting in ambush was a valid hunting strategy. They were roughly 3 meters long, built low to the ground with too many legs and far too many teeth. Their hides were armored with overlapping plates that shimmered with the same purple-crimson pattern as the trees, perfect camouflage. And they were fast, terrifyingly, impossibly fast. Ramos put 3 plasma bolts into the first one's face before it crossed half the distance. It kept coming. Armor's too thick. Joints, Tanaka shouted. Hit the joints between the plates. The humans adapted instantly. A species that had climbed to the top of Earth's food chain through pattern recognition and tool use didn't need to be told twice. Their fire shifted, targeting exposed joints and softer tissue. Creatures that had probably reigned as apex predators on this world for millions of years discovered, to their shock and displeasure, that apex was a relative term. The humans moved like they'd trained together for years, which they had, covering angles and reloading in rotation. They didn't panic, didn't freeze, didn't break formation. They simply calculated vectors, assessed threats, and applied overwhelming force with the cold efficiency of a species that had survived ice ages, supervolcanoes, and each other. Within 90 seconds, 8 alien predators lay dead or dying around them. Everyone okay? Yannick did a quick head count. No injuries. This planet is serious about the everything is trying to kill you vibe, Samuel Anderson said, breathing hard but steady. Category 9 isn't a suggestion, Jennifer Anderson agreed, ejecting a spent power cell. It's a promise. They pressed forward. The jungle grew denser, the canopy thicker. Strange calls echoed through the twilight gloom, some recognizable as animals, others that sounded like nothing that should exist outside a fever dream. The beetles followed them at a distance, waiting patiently for someone to fall. One click to target. Korvach's voice crackled through their comms. Thermal shows, Captain. There are only 8 survivors now. Down from 17 when the beacon went active. Yannick's jaw tightened. Noted. Faster, people. They broke into a run. Not the desperate sprint of prey being chased, but the measured, sustainable pace of endurance hunters. The stride that had allowed their ancestors to run down game over distances that would have killed faster predators. Humans didn't win by being strongest or fast. They won by refusing to stop. The jungle seemed to recognize this and responded accordingly. Vines lashed out from trees. The ground opened into sinkholes filled with acidic enzymes. Things with wings and too many eyes dive-bombed from above. A plant that Tanaka swore shouldn't have motor function tried to grab Samuel Anderson, and only Jennifer's quick reflexes with a machete saved him from becoming fertilizer. "This planet really wants us dead," Okoye gasped as they ran. "The feeling's mutual," Yannick replied. They burst into a clearing and found the survivors. 8 sentients. A mix of species had barricaded themselves inside the remains of their shuttle. The hull was scored with claw marks and acid burns. A pile of alien corpses surrounded the perimeter, evidence of a desperate last stand, and circling the wreckage. Patient as death itself were creatures that made the ambush predators look like house pets. They stood 4 meters tall at the shoulder, hexapedal with heads that split into 3 separate jaws. Their eyes, 12 of them, tracked movement with the fixed intensity of creatures that had never learned what failure meant. Their hides weren't armored. They didn't need to be. They radiated such casual lethality that armor would have been redundant. "Apex predators," Tanaka whispered. "Actual apex predators. The ecological pyramid's absolute peak." "Cool," Yannick said. "I've always wanted to fight one of those." The creatures noticed the humans. For a long moment, 2 sets of apex predators regarded each other across the clearing. One that had evolved in a planet determined to kill everything, and one that had evolved on a planet almost as determined and had simply refused to die. Then both sides reached the same conclusion. This was going to be interesting. The creatures charged. The humans opened fire. And somewhere in orbit, Rinka's sensors detected 8 human biosigns remain absolutely stable: elevated heart rates, increased adrenaline, heightened neural activity consistent with combat, but 0 signs of panic or system failure, as they engaged hostile forces that had annihilated 17 highly trained operatives. "Humans," she clicked to Commander Thelos. "Absolutely ridiculous." "You say that like it's a bad thing," Thelos replied, watching the thermal imagery. Against all probability, the human squad was winning. The apex predators learned several things in the next 40 seconds. First, plasma fire, delivered by beings with millions of years of practice in throwing things accurately, hurt considerably. Second, creatures that hunted in packs were not impressed by other creatures that hunted in packs. Third, humans, when pressed, stopped thinking of combat as survival and started thinking of it as problem-solving. And humans were very, very good at solving problems. The lead creature, Tanaka would later classify it as a megastalker, lunged at Yannick with all 3 jaws splayed open. The captain sidestepped with minimal wasted motion, placed his rifle's barrel against the soft tissue behind the creature's middle jaw, and fired twice. The megastalker's head exploded in a shower of purple ichor. Its packmates didn't hesitate or mourn. They adapted, splitting up to attack from multiple angles. "Ramos, left flank," Yannick called. "Got him." The sergeant dropped to one knee, tracked the 2 creatures angling through the underbrush, and waited. When they burst from cover, he'd already calculated their trajectory. 4 shots. 2 corpses. Okoye and Zhao handled the right approach with coordinated fire that suggested either telepathy or just really good practice. Jennifer Anderson provided covering fire while Samuel dragged an injured survivor, a Vrelian commando who looked like he'd personally fought every organism on the planet behind their defensive line. 6 down, 3 more incoming. Korvax's voice crackled through comms. She'd brought the Valkyrie around, using its point defense lasers to suppress the aerial threats that had taken the opportunity to join the feast. The remaining megastalkers decided on a new strategy: coordinated assault from 3 directions simultaneously. It was a sound tactical decision that would have overwhelmed most species. Humans had been dealing with wolves, big cats, and each other for their entire evolutionary history. Coordinated attacks were nothing new. "Pattern Delta 4, Yannick said calmly. Reloading. The squad shifted positions with practiced ease. What had been a defensive semicircle became an interlocking field of fire with overlapping coverage zones. When the creatures struck, they found themselves in a kill box where every angle was covered, every approach monitored, every movement anticipated. The last megastalker died trying to reach Samuel Anderson, collapsing 2 meters short with 17 plasma burns across its body. Silence fell, broken only by the clicks and whirs of the jungle and the heavy breathing of the survivors. "Perimeter secure," Okoye reported, No additional thermal signatures within immediate range. For now, Tanaka added, scanning the tree line. This planet has made it very clear it has an unlimited supply of things that want to kill us. Yannick approached the barricaded shuttle. This is Captain Okafor of the coalition vessel Northern Star. We're here for extraction. Can you move? The hatch opened hesitantly. A Thrin officer, their blue skin mottled with chemical burns, stared out at the carnage. You just killed 6 mega-stalkers. In less than a minute. 8, Ramos corrected. Captain got 2. That's impossible. We had 17 people. We had heavy weapons. We had terrain advantage and fortified positions. The mega-stalkers killed 9 of us in the first hour. Yeah, well, Jennifer Anderson said, keeping watch on the jungle. You're not human. It wasn't said with arrogance, just simple statement of fact. The way one might say water is wet, or vacuums are empty. The 8 survivors emerged slowly. They were a mixed group, 2 Vrelian commandos, 3 Thrin explorers, a Keshari scientist, a Meridian pilot, and someone from a species Tanaka didn't immediately recognize. All showed signs of trauma, both physical and psychological. They'd spent 47 minutes on a planet where everything wanted them dead, and it showed. We need to move, Yannick said. This clearing won't stay safe long. Safe? The Thrin officer's voice climbed. Captain, nothing about this planet is safe. The trees have neurotoxins. The rain is acidic. The beetles will strip flesh from bone. Yeah, we noticed, Yannick interrupted gently. That's why we need to move. Korvach, what's our best extraction route? Negative on direct pickup, sir. The canopy's too thick here, and the plants will shred the Valkyrie if I try to hover. Best option is the plateau where we landed. That's a clickback. 1 kilometer. The Vrelian commando laughed bitterly. We barely managed 10 meters before losing people. You expect us to cross a kilometer of this hell? We just crossed it to get here. Samuel Anderson pointed out. You're human. Yes, which is why you're going to stay in the middle of our formation and do exactly what we tell you. Yannick's tone brooked no argument. We didn't fly through Category 9's atmosphere to debate survival strategies. Form up, double column survivors in the center. Weapons out, eyes open. Anyone falls behind, they get carried. Questions? Silence. The survivors were learning what every species that encountered humanity eventually learned. Humans didn't give up ever. It was their most dangerous quality and their most admirable one. The trek back began. If the journey to the survivors had been difficult, the return trip was biblical. The planet seemed to have taken the humans' success personally and responded with everything in its considerable arsenal. They hadn't covered 100 meters when the first wave hit. Dozens of those ambush predators, coordinated by some sort of pheromone communication that made them attack in synchronized waves. The humans held formation, putting down suppressing fire that turned the jungle floor into a light show of plasma bolts. Survivors huddled in the center, occasionally adding their own weapons to the defense, but mostly just trying to understand how the humans could keep firing, keep moving, keep maintaining perfect tactical awareness while surrounded by things designed by nature to kill. On your 6. Okoye shouted. Yannick spun, fired, dropped a creature mid-leap. Zhao. Watch the overhang. Already on it. The engineer targeted a vine thick as a tree trunk that had been snaking toward them with disturbing intent. It thrashed violently when hit, releasing a cloud of spores that made the Thrin survivors choke. The humans barely blinked, their respiratory systems filtering out the toxins with the efficiency of a species that had evolved breathing everything from volcanic ash to industrial pollution. 200 meters. 300. The jungle threw everything it had at them. Acid-spitting flora, tunneling creatures that erupted from below. Something that looked like a cross between a squid and a tank that rolled at them like an armored boulder. The humans met each threat with the cold pragmatism of a species that had learned violence was sometimes the only solution. They weren't brutal or cruel. Every kill was efficient, economical, necessary. But they were absolutely relentless. This is insane, the Keshari scientist whispered, mandibles clicking in shock. How are you not exhausted? Cardio, Ramos grunted, dropping an empty power cell and slamming in a fresh one, without breaking stride. We do a lot of cardio. You're barely breathing hard, lady. My ancestors hunted gazelles by jogging after them for 20 kilometers straight until the gazelles died from exhaustion. This is just walking fast with occasional murder. 500 meters. The air grew thicker, hotter. The temperature spiked towards 60 degrees. The survivors were flagging, their species' physiological limits being tested beyond design specifications. The humans adapted. Jennifer Anderson hoisted the smallest Thrin over her shoulder. Samuel did the same with the Muradan pilot. They kept moving, their pace barely slowing despite the added weight. "You're carrying them," the Vrelian commando said in disbelief. "In this heat, in this gravity, while fighting." "Yep," Jennifer replied, pausing only to shoot something with too many legs and not enough sense to stay hidden. "Humans are persistence hunters. We're built for the long haul." "That's not biology, doesn't work that way." "Tell that to evolution. We're from Earth, Category 8 Death World. Compared to home, this place is just eager." 700 meters. The plateau came into view with the Valkyrie visible as a blessed silver sanctuary, and between them and safety stood the jungle's response to human audacity. It was enormous, easily 8 meters tall, built like a nightmare given physical form. Its hide was so thick that plasma fire barely scored it. It had 6 arms, each tipped with claws designed to shred tank armor. And its eyes held intelligence. Real intelligence. The kind that calculated, planned, and understood that these small creatures were the most dangerous thing it had ever encountered. "Oh, that's adorable," Ramos said. "The planet sent us a boss fight." "Korvach," Yannick said calmly. "I need the Valkyrie's heavy cannon online." "Warming up now, Captain. 30 seconds to firing solution." "We might not have 30 seconds. The creature roared, a sound so deep it shook loose dirt from the trees. Then it charged. "Survivors, get to the plateau," Yannick ordered. "Everyone else buy them time." The humans didn't retreat. They advanced to meet the creature, spreading out to divide its attention. It was tactically sound and completely insane. 8 humans deliberately engaging something that could have eaten them as appetizers. But humans had killed whales with pointed sticks and brought down mammoths with rocks and patience. Size was just another problem to solve. The creature swung at Okanai. She ducked, rolled, came up firing at its knee joint. The plasma burned through cartilage and tendon. The creature stumbled, roared, swung with another arm at Sal. The engineer blocked with his rifle. The weapon shattered, but he'd bought himself time to dodge. "That one's going on the expense report." Tenica was scanning frantically. "Weak points. It has to have weak points. Everything has weak points." "Found one," Samuel Anderson pointed. Behind the creature's armored head, where its central nervous system would be, was a small gap between plates, maybe 10 centimeters across. "That's a hell of a shot," Jennifer Anderson observed. "You're a hell of a shot," Yannick replied. "Take it." Jennifer Anderson had qualified as an expert marksman on 5 different worlds in 3 different gravity fields, using 4 different weapon systems. She'd made shots that other species considered physically impossible. She dropped to one knee, sighted, controlled her breathing. The technique humans had perfected over thousands of years of throwing sharp things at other things they wanted dead, and fired. The plasma bolt traveled 20 meters, threaded between thrashing limbs, and entered the gap between plates with surgical precision. The creature's roar cut off mid-bellow. It stood for a moment confused by the signals its dying brain was sending, and then toppled like a felled tree. 30 seconds exactly. Korvach's voice came through comms. "Heavy cannon ready." "Oh, you already killed it, of course you did." "Extraction now," Yannick ordered. "Everyone on board before this planet decides to send us something worse." They sprinted the last 100 meters. The survivors were already aboard, collapsed in the Valkyrie's cargo bay in various states of shock. The humans filed in with practiced efficiency, weapons still trained on the jungle, until the last person Yannick boarded and slammed the hatch. "Go, go, go," he shouted. The Valkyrie's engines screamed to life. The dropship launched vertically, trading subtlety for speed, punching through the canopy hard enough to shred vines that tried to grab them. Behind them the jungle roared its fury at prey that had escaped. "Altitude 5,000 and climbing," Korvach reported. "No pursuit. I think the planet's given up. Or it's realized we're more trouble than we're worth," Ramos suggested. The Valkyrie broke atmosphere and banked toward the northern star, which waited in high orbit like a patient parent. As the curve of DX4477 fell away below them, Yannick finally allowed himself to relax. "Mission successful," he said quietly. 8 survivors retrieved. 0 human casualties. In the cargo bay, the survivors sat in silence, processing what had just happened. The Vrelian commando finally spoke. "You do this regularly." "Define regularly," Jennifer Anderson replied. You walked into a Category 9 death world, fought your way through apex predators, rescued us, and fought your way back out. Like it was routine." "It pretty much is routine," Samuel Anderson said. "Last month we did a similar extraction from a volcanic planet. Month before that was a fungal death trap. You get used to it. You get used to death worlds?" "We're from a death world," Tanaka explained. "Earth's a Category 8. We grew up with predators, poisons, parasites, extreme weather, natural disasters, and other humans. This place was tough, sure, but it wasn't novel." The Keshari scientist's mandibles clicked rapidly. "You called this decent exercise?" "Well, yeah," Ramos said. "Got the heart rate up, put some strain on the muscles. Better than spending the day in the gym." Silence fell again. The survivors exchanged looks that confirmed they were all having the same thought. Humans were absolutely terrifying. Aboard the Northern Star, Brilliance greeted them at the airlock with what passed for relief in Keshari body language. "Captain Okafor, glad you're alive." The commander was having anxiety attacks about the insurance paperwork. "Tell the commander he can relax," Yannick replied, stepping through. "Everyone made it back, so we saw. The telemetry was educational. You engaged 7 different hostile species, eliminated over 100 individual organisms, traversed hostile terrain in extreme environmental conditions, and extracted 8 survivors from a fortified position in under 3 hours. 3 hours and 17 minutes, Kovac corrected. "Let's be precise. You do realize," Vrikak continued, "that most rescue operations for Category 9 planets are classified as recovery of remains. Successful extraction isn't considered possible. Most rescue operations aren't run by humans," Yannick said simply. "Is medical standing by for the survivors?" "Already prepped. Though I suspect they need psychological support more than physical treatment." Indeed, the survivors were already being escorted to medbay by the Northern Star's medical staff, most of whom were staring at the humans with a mixture of awe and healthy concern. Commander Thalos approached, his fur slightly less ruffled than before. "Captain, I owe you an apology. I thought this mission was a death sentence." "It would have been," Yannick agreed. "For anyone else. But humans don't die easy, Commander. It's kind of our thing. I'm beginning to understand that the Council is already calling. They want a full report on how you succeeded where others failed." "That's easy. We're from Earth. Compared to where we evolved, every other planet in the galaxy is on easy mode." Rinke's antennae twitched with amusement. "The Galactic Council has officially reclassified Earth from Category 8 to Category 9 following your mission." "They did what?" "Apparently, any planet that produces beings who consider DX4477 decent exercise deserves the highest danger rating. There's talk of posting warning beacons around your solar system." Yannick laughed, a genuine sound of mirth that made several nearby crew members flinch. "Let me get this straight. We just successfully extracted survivors from a Category 9 planet, proving humans can handle the absolute worst the galaxy has to offer, and the Council's response is to make our home planet sound more dangerous. Political logic rarely makes sense," Delos observed. "But yes, Earth is now officially considered one of the most dangerous planets in known space." "Good," Yannick said. "Maybe people will think twice before causing trouble in our neighborhood." In the wardroom, the human squad gathered for debriefing and the sacred tradition of post-mission drinking. Even on a multi-species vessel, the humans maintained certain cultural practices. And one of those was the belief that near-death experiences should be processed with alcohol and storytelling. "To Zhao's rifle," Ramos raised his glass. "May it be remembered for its noble sacrifice." "To Jennifer's impossible shot," Okoye added. "To not dying on a planet that really, really wanted us dead," Samuel Anderson concluded. They drank, laughed, and began the process of turning horror into humor, another uniquely human trait that baffled most other species. Tanaka pulled up her xenobiological data. "You know what's interesting? DX4477 isn't actually that unusual. The galaxy's full of high-gravity, hostile environment, apex predator worlds. It's just that most species evolved on gentler planets and never developed the adaptations to handle extremes. So we're the weird ones, Jennifer Anderson said. We're very weird. We evolved on a planet that kept trying to kill us and responded by getting harder to kill. We're endurance hunters with opposable thumbs, complex tool use, cooperative social structures, and the stubbornness to keep trying when any sane species would quit. From a galactic perspective, we're basically nightmare fuel. And yet, Yannick said, entering the wardroom with his own drink, we're also the ones who run into Category 9 death worlds to save strangers, because that's what humans do. We survive, we persist, and we protect our own, even when our own includes species who think we're terrifying. Hear, hear, the squad chorused. Later, in the quiet of his cabin, Yannick filed his mission report. He kept it simple, factual, devoid of embellishment. The numbers told the story clearly enough. 8 humans entered hostile environment. 8 humans exited hostile environment. 8 additional lives saved. Mission successful. But he added one personal note at the end, knowing it would eventually reach the Council archives and become part of humanity's official record. Planet DX-4477 presents significant challenges for most species. For humans, it represents a difficult but manageable environment. Recommend reclassifying from unsurvivable to inadvisable for non-adapted species. The galaxy contains many dangerous worlds. Humans evolved on one of them. We know how to handle danger. It's what we do best. He sent the report, leaned back, and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there were millions of worlds, many of them hostile, deadly, determined to kill anything foolish enough to land on them. And on one particular blue-green marble, a species had evolved that looked at those deadly worlds and said, "Challenge accepted." That, Yannick reflected, was humanity's real superpower. Not strength or speed or intelligence, though they had those in abundance, but stubbornness. The absolute refusal to accept that something was impossible just because it was difficult. They'd crawled out of Africa on bleeding feet. They'd crossed oceans on logs in hope. They'd reached for the stars from the bottom of a gravity well. And now they'd walked into hell itself and walked back out carrying people who needed saving. Because that's what humans did. The galaxy called places like DX-4477 death worlds and marked them with warnings and prohibitions. Humans called them Tuesday and packed extra ammunition. And that ultimately was why humanity would thrive among the stars. Not because they were the strongest or smartest or fastest, but because they simply refused to quit ever. In the medbay, the survivors were being treated, their physical wounds healing faster than their psychological ones. They would carry the memory of those 47 minutes for the rest of their lives, the terror of facing a planet that wanted them dead. But they'd also carry another memory, of 8 humans who had walked into that same hell, shrugged off everything it threw at them, and carried survivors out on their shoulders while cracking jokes and calling it exercise. The Brilliant commando, wrapped in medical bandages but alive, spoke to the ship's counselor in the hushed tones of someone sharing a religious experience. They didn't seem scared, he said. Not once. Not when the megastalkers attacked. Not when that final monster appeared. They just adapted, solved the problem, moved forward. Like fear was a suggestion they'd decided to ignore. Humans feel fear, the counselor assured him. They just don't let it stop them. That's what makes them terrifying, the Vrelian replied. They face death and choose to keep fighting anyway. What kind of species does that? A species that has survived every attempt to kill it, the counselor said simply. Earth tried for millions of years. It failed. After that, nothing else in the galaxy stands a chance. Back on DX-4477. The jungle continued its endless cycle of life consuming life. The corpses of apex predators fed the beetles, which fed the next generation of horrors. In a few years, the ecosystem would completely erase any sign that humans had ever set foot on the planet. But the memory would persist in ecological databases, in survivor testimonies, in the quiet conversations of species across the coalition. The story of 8 humans who had treated a Category 9 death world like a morning jog with weapons. The galaxy was full of dangerous places, but it had learned an important lesson. There was something more dangerous than any planet, any environment, any apex predator. Humans who looked at impossible odds. calculated their chances, and decided the odds were wrong. Humans who ran toward danger instead of away from it. Humans who would cross death itself to save someone they'd never met. And that was scarier than any death world could ever be.